Welcome to the Future Generations podcast, providing you with the world-changing content necessary to inspire you, your family, and our planet to a life of optimal health potential. We'll help you make the choices that powerfully influence the lives you bring into this world. It's time to strengthen our resolve to do better now and for our future generations with your host, Dr. Stanton Hom.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Future Generations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stanton Hom, and this is. I was just telling Joel, this is a pipe dream of mine. I remember the first time I read a full book of yours, and it was titled "Folks, This Ain't Normal." That was a lot of years ago that I read. I was earlier in practice. I'm a prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here in San Diego. Been a long time follower of your movement. And I remember reading that book, and I was floored because in my practice, we have said for a lot of years, normalize normal. Like we have to re-normalize what normal actually is. And every time I think I know what it is, I look to you and I remember that I don't really know what normal is until I'm looking at Joel. And so for those of you who don't know who Joel Salatin is, this is the man, the myth, the legend. Joel, I would love for you to introduce yourself so our audience gets to know you both personally and professionally.
Sure. So our family co-owns Polyface Farms in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. You may have seen the farm featured in Michael Pollan's bestseller Omnivore's Dilemma, and then the video sequel to that, Food Inc., which was a Grammy Award nominated documentary. We were the good guys. We were the good guys in the book. We were the good guys in the film that, of course, featured the problems within the industrial food system. Our family came to this property in 1961. I was just 4 years old when we came. So if you're quick with math, you know that I'm 66 right now, and I grew up here. And Dad was an accountant, a tax accountant, and Mom was a high school girls phys ed teacher. And the off-farm income paid for the land. That took about a decade. And during that early decade, this was the most gullied, worn out rock pile of a farm. That's why they bought it. It was so cheap. And Dad sought counsel, from experts. How do I make a living on this farm? And everything was, buy chemical fertilizers, graze the woods, plant corn, build silos, borrow money, plow and all that. And his father, my grandfather, was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine when it came out in 1945, had a wonderful big organic garden, and was a master gardener, big compost piles and things. And so Dad got this kind of ecological bent from him, and I got it from Dad. And so I just grew up that way. And so we started experimenting with things with portable infrastructure, composting, perennials, controlled grazing with livestock, and then direct marketing, where we actually owned the supply chain right to the end consumer.
Wow.
And so today, here we are. Dad passed away in 1988. I was just 31, so I lost him early, but we've been very blessed here. We now have about 20 of us that earn a full-time living here from the farm, and we have beef, pork, chicken, both meat and eggs, turkey, duck eggs, lamb, and forestry products, and we ship nationwide, and we service some 7,000-8,000 families, restaurants, some other institutions, markets, and yeah, it's been quite a ride.
There's been two ranchers and farmers on my podcast so far that credit you for mentorship. One is Paul Grieve from Pasture Bird, and the other is Kevin Muno from Perennial Pastures Ranch out here. He's a regenerative beef farmer out here in San Diego County. And it's just, you can't go into this movement for anything with regard to regenerative agriculture and not have your name be mentioned at some form or fashion. And so it's really great to hear that story. I'm reading Polyface Micro right now. We're sitting on 3 acres here in San Diego, and I don't quite know what to do with it yet, but I do know that I love when you say, like, one of the first things you got to do if you believe in freedom and sovereignty is you got to like grow your own food. You actually have to be food sovereign. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I would just say that, we've been lied to. We've been lied to for a while, for several decades, actually. We were told, I'm saying we collectively as a culture,
Yes.
we were told as a culture, hey, you don't have to do any of those mundane chores of life. You don't have to gather eggs. You don't have to cook. You don't have to grow any green beans. All you got to do is watch TV, make sure you have beer in the fridge, and the NFL's on the tube, and go to your Caribbean cruises and your soccer games, and you will be free. You'll be free to live your happiest life by disengaging from all these chores and these mundane things of life. Well, along came COVID, and then along came Putin in Ukraine.
Wow.
Suddenly we had empty store shelves, and we had panic basically a panic in the streets, and suddenly we realized the emperor had no clothes. We suddenly realized, as a culture, oh wow, we've been lied to. The path to freedom is not disengaging with the foundations of life, but it's actually engaging. It's actually participating. It's actually being aware of my body's health. What makes me feel good? What makes me feel lethargic? These kinds of things. And so now we understand that true freedom and liberty comes from participating in these mundane aspects of life. And I would just suggest that anyone who loves freedom and who loves liberty right now, today, people who are thinking like that are thinking, how do I disentangle from the economic system, the medical system, the education system, the investment system, the food system? How do I disentangle? Because what they promised me that Chef Boyardee and Lunchables and Hot Pockets would give me freedom. It's actually enslaved me.
Wow.
To a World Economic Forum agenda that is very dubious at best and nefarious at worst.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we are. And so I encourage anyone who actually believes in freedom and personal liberty to actually realize that comes with a participatory mindset.
It's crazy because we have done that. So I've been in practice 13 years. So I still consider myself a young buck in this movement, right? Because you've been doing this for a long time, and generations, if you add in your father and your grandfather's generation. But something as simple as like teaching new mothers, like, to that breastfeeding is not just better and more natural and oxytocin, but far superior to the toxic formula that the entire system is built upon, right? That my brother, like, the difference between even my brother and myself is my mom was taught with my brother, just 3 years older than me, like, don't breastfeed him. This formula is better, and then one baby later, and then all of a sudden I'm breastfed, my sister's breastfed. And then there's this whole generational shift where, when we grow our families, like, we just know that now. And so we're teaching these families it in a microcosm way, but you're taking it and expanding it much further. One of the things that I remember from your book, and I think this is, you just laid it out perfectly, because we don't realize that we're stuck and we're enslaved into this system that's driven by this World Economic Forum, Soros funded, et
Yeah.
And then the more kids you have, the more, like, you are shackled, right? Versus, I remember your book saying there is no age where a child is wasteful to a family unit. Like they're at some point, they are a part of this journey to grow this entire movement of how you cultivate family. And I thought that was remarkable because you just shared it macrocosm, global view, but I think you've taken that all the way down to the family view too, right?
Yeah. Yes, very much so. I think in the book I remarked that any culture that views its children as a liability and not an asset is literally uh, socially and spiritually bankrupt.
Wow.
I mean, if we are so um, um, unimaginative, if we're so unimaginative that we can't put a positive value on children, then goodness, where is our value?
Right.
And so yeah, that's the idea. And yeah, you're exactly right. TV dinners came right along with Infamil and Similac.
Mhm.
I mean, that was all a part of that whole message that that moms, you can leave the home, go to work, and this will free you from the drudgery of housework and raising your kids. We'll let the public schools raise your kids. We'll let Procter and Gamble feed you for dinner, and and everybody will live happily ever after. And here we are, suddenly, by the 1980s, we have La Leche League, and people, that pendulum that swung so far out of balance, started to swing back. And we can be very thankful that all of those, all of those narratives, finally met their end. Just like so many narratives today. We've been told that factory farming, that if we're going to feed the world, we've got to confine all the chickens in a factory house and the cows in a feedlot, and we've got to give them subtherapeutic antibiotics so they stay healthy. And all this is necessary. And guess what that spawned? Just like the lack of breastfeeding spawned all sorts of asthma and different child maladies.
Mhm.
The onset of the factory farming model, that centralization, or that assault against natural patterns, created a new lexicon that didn't exist when I was a kid. We never heard the phrase, and I'm a little older than you are, but I can tell you, we never heard the phrase food allergy. I mean, it
Wow.
didn't even exist. If you wanted to have a birthday party for your 3-year-old, you didn't have to spend 2 days on the phone with all the other moms asking what you could serve or not. Everybody just brought what they wanted, and we just ate. And we didn't hear things like gluten intolerance. We didn't.
Wow.
I mean, we didn't know anybody that had diabetes. We didn't know any. You might know one person who was obese, but it just didn't exist. We never heard the word Campylobacter, Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella. And what this is, Dr. Stan, what this is a new lexicon that nature has invented to express it's like a scream. It's like a nature scream.
Mhm.
Enough abuse, enough disrespect. And that's the lexicon of it. And so when we disrespect and abuse nature to this extent, it's going to come back with everything from what I mentioned to things like MRSA and C. diff and superbugs and all these kinds of things.
So you're basically, I hope people are getting this. And I know our listeners are pretty versed in understanding the infinite wisdom of nature, right? That we could argue that, or maybe we should say, and this is for some of the natural providers too, who normalize these conversations about food allergies, right? And the truth of the matter is what you're sharing with me, and I almost want to go back to the origins of this belief system for you, is that you fill in the blank problematic, whether it's like you're saying, Campylobacteria, C. diff, all these kind of, oh my gosh, if you get this, you're going to die, right? Like they're actually nature's way of telling us that we've lived so far out of alignment with her infinite wisdom that she's actually creating this distortion in not only our ecosystem in our bodies, but the ecosystem in totality to wake our asses up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a magnificent canary in the mine, but it's much bigger than a canary in the mine.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's way bigger than that. And we're Americans. I mean, I'm proud to be an American. I love our country, and there are things that we like to be first in. We like to have we like to be first in the basketball team, first in Olympic gold medals. We like to be first in things, but the U.S. is now first in something that's not something that we should be proud to be first in. We now lead the world in chronic non-infectious morbidity.
Wow.
We now lead the world. We're number one in the world. And that's not a place to be proud. That's not a place to be number one in the world. But we invented McDonald's. We invented hydrogenated vegetable oil. We invented high fructose corn syrup. We invented, monosodium glutamate. I mean, we invented all these things. And there is a reason why nature's balance sheet does not lie. That you can play around with statistics, if you want, on your taxes, but nature's balance sheet doesn't lie. And when we have this level of dysfunction, of unhealthiness and dysfunctionality within including a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico, when we have three-legged salamanders, frogs that are infertile, eagle eggs that won't hatch. When you have that kind of thing going on, that is a it's a flag. It's nature's flag saying, caution, maybe we better slow down here.
One of my mentors, he would always say, like, and then when you see that, right, when you see these cancers and all these chronic illnesses poke out in other species other than humans, other animal species other than humans, you don't see the industry saying, let's have a race, right, with pink ribbons, because these animals are producing breast cancer. Let's do a race for these breast cancers. Let's race for the cure, and then formulate all these drugs to then treat. And then it's this cycle, right? It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. I appreciate you sharing that. You are one of the most dynamic, but also very pointed speakers that I appreciate, because you just, you call a spade a spade. I'm curious, were you always like this? I know you mentioned Rodale's organic gardening, and I know obviously there's been some of this passed through the generations, but there's an expression of the activism today that I feel is a model for not just the whole of humanity, but our audience is specifically parents. Like, we're young parents mostly, just doing our best to navigate, hopefully just leaving the system as best as possible, efficiently and effectively as possible. But I'd love to know, where this started for you.
Yeah, as you get older, a lot of times things that happen in your childhood, you don't connect the dots till you're older, and you're in retrospect, you're looking back and you say, oh, that was a big deal. Oh, that was a big deal. And as a child, you didn't realize it was a big deal, but later, you look back. And so for me, my indicator of that, or story of that, is my grandfather. I mentioned he was a master gardener in Indiana. Of course, we were here in Virginia, so we didn't get up to see him very often. We'd get up to see, grandparents once a year, always after hay season. We got our hay in, and then we'd go up and see grandma and grandpa in Indiana. And so we were always late in the summer, and he had he had a very large garden. I'm going to say it was a 1/4 acre, which is that's a large garden. And it was completely bounded on the sides by a tea trellis grape arbor, and he had Concord grapes that grew up. And so here I am, I'm 6, 7 years old, and I'm just tall enough to reach the bottom, the bottom grapes, and they were always ripe when we went there late in the summer. And and remember, we came here, our garden here was clay clods. We'd throw them at each other, as kids, and it was just hard, what we call hard scrabble. It was hard scrabble. We didn't have any soil. We had rocks, we had gullies. We had one gully 16 feet deep that we measured, but I'd go up there to Grandpa's, and it was just like you just walked out into this massive garden, all of these dripping, oozing grapes that you could just eat as many as you wanted. Nobody was saying stop eating, and I think that the juxtaposition of our worn out property here in Virginia and trying to eke out a green bean and eke out a strawberry plant here versus Grandpa's just abundance, it just lit in me a desire to, can I do that here? Could I heal? Could I bring this back to that level? Could I walk out my back porch at some time in my life and feel like I'm being embraced by a nest of abundance? Can I create that? And I think that when I look back, kind of subconsciously and look at things, that is definitely one of the experiences. And that happened more than once. We went every year, and so each year I'm reminded again, oh wow, this is incredible. And at home we're just, we're struggling. We got thistles and thorns and rocks, and up here it's great. So the greatest blessing of my life is that now we have recreated that. Wow. We have gotten to that point. And when I walk out the back porch, and we have, like we just participated in a 2-year study by the Smithsonian. They did a working landscape study, and one of the benchmarks they studied was pollinators. And as you know, pollinators are in trouble in our world, actually. And on our farm, I think we were the only one of 29 sites in Virginia that they found all 8 known varieties of bumblebees to exist in Virginia. And so, wow. Again, those are really critical benchmarks of flourishing and vibrancy when you get really robust pollinator numbers, because they're the most susceptible to pesticides, herbicides, all these things. That's where you start breaking down in those kinds of things. So yeah, it's been a wonderful affirmation and confirmation of our life's work. And the joy is, I'm not that old, and to see this transformation happen in my lifetime is unbelievably hopeful and inspiring. Yeah. That the damage that we've done is not irreversible. In fact, it can be reversed pretty quickly if we just all pull together and head the right way.
I was speaking to a good friend of mine, Jim Gale, and he was talking about, you just shared something that's really, really powerful, just about the concept of abundance, right? A lot of the people that I've been interviewing lately, whether it's through the lens of water, but especially through the lens of soil and through the lens of regenerative agriculture, is that you get a lens of abundance that largely just doesn't exist today. Even in this kind of freedom movement, if it's devoid of this focus, which you are just without saying, it lightly, like a legend in, right? Without this kind of like focus on food and agriculture and soil and regeneration, you don't really know. Like, you don't really have a framework for what the true form of abundance that exists, like, really right at our fingertips. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Oh, it is. If I may share a couple of little statistics here, please, from our own experience. So when I was a kid, and I'm out, 7, 8 years old, and I'm walking across the farm, I can remember very well walking the entire place, all the pastures, and being able to never set foot on a piece of vegetation. That's how barren it was. Wow. The soil, the distance between grass plants was so far. And I can remember as we began, when I was in my early teens, I can remember that we had 10 cows. So we had 100 acres open, 100 acres of pasture. We had 10 cows. And there were a couple of years we had to actually buy hay to supplement because we didn't have enough hay to support, 10 or 12 cows. Today, on the same acreage, we support 100 cows and have plenty.
Wow.
I mean, if you had told me, 50 years ago that in 50 years there's going to be a tenfold, not twofold, not threefold, but tenfold increase in production here without planting a seed and without buying a bag of chemical fertilizer, who would have believed that? Who would have believed that? And so I can just testify that nature, too often in Western conventional chemical agriculture, we view nature as a reluctant partner, as I've got to get you in a half Nelson and wrestle you, and I'm going to make you grow, produce this, and we have this kind of, really aggressive, but actually nature is a benevolent lover that just wants to be caressed in the right places.
Wow.
And that's a very different outlook on where we are.
When did you, I appreciate that analogy, because I would say that I might be in this phase, right? Because we've only been here a year and we really haven't done anything with our acreage yet. We hired Jim's team and they've helped us design, and we're just realizing maybe what it actually takes, to do that. Cause I'm a business owner. I have 9 employees, and then we have 2 young kids, and it's just gnarly experience, like even fathoming it. Right. But I'm curious, in the 50-year journey, like I remember being in 5 years in practice, and I remember being like, I think I know my shit now. And like people were starting to, like, young docs are like, hey, can I shadow you? Right. And then I got 10 years and I was like, cause that was the beginning of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I smell this. I'm sniffing this out. Like, this is about a vaccine. Oh, this is about global tyranny. Oh, wait a minute. This is about vaccine passports. This is about bringing back segregation. Oh, this is about 24-hour surveillance. Oh, wait, no, this is about a social credit system. Like, it just 10 years in, and there's no way that anyone could like convince me that what was happening 3 years ago wasn't going to lead to me and you talking
right
about not just because let's rewind 4 years and we'd be talking about regenerative agriculture and how amazing it is. And now that's a good path for your family. And now we're talking about it through the lens of, oh, if you want freedom, if you actually believe in this thing called sovereignty, then you better understand this kind of food thing. Because if you don't, then you actually don't understand it. But I'm curious, like, if you could take that 50-year journey, when did you, like, what was that journey like? When did those catharses and those moments where you're just like, it was just inarguable what you were doing, to where you are now, and you're one of the legends in the movement?
Yeah, well, oh goodness.
Sorry if that's too much.
Let me give you one that's so simple, but when you look back on it, it's just profound. So I'm walking through the field one day, and I was I don't know, maybe maybe I was 20 years old, something. I'm walking in through the field, and back in those days we had broom sedge. Now broom sedge is a terrible forage. Nothing likes it. It's a power. If you look in a weed book, the weed book will say broom sedge, poverty plant, low calcium in the soil, completely bankrupt, worn out. And I'm walking through the field and I see, so here's this big old clump of broom sedge, and here is a one spire of red clover coming right up through this big clump of broom sedge. A little it wasn't robust, it was spindly, but here's this one little spire of red clover with a little pink blossom on it right up through the middle of this thing. So I come home, I get my weed book out, and because different plants indicate different types and mineral, health of the soil. So look at red clover. Guess what it says? It says indicator of extremely fertile soil, requires high calcium, high mineralization. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh, wait a minute. I've got broom sedge right here that's exactly opposite. I've got red clover coming up through, and it hit me. Dr. Stan. It hit me. I am seeing ecology changing before my eyes. I'm seeing fertility. I'm seeing the life of the soil, the biology. I'm seeing it speak a different vegetation, because there's a different community there. And they know there's a new sheriff in town. And this clover seed that might have been red clover seed will stay dormant up to 1,000 years. Think about that. 1,000 years in the soil, and something happens. Talk about wisdom. Think about that. It makes a seed this year, goes in the ground. Next year it says, we're not going to sprout. The next year, we're not going to sprout. Next year, don't worry, I'm not going to go to 1,000. But, year 873, okay? Something happens in that soil ecology, and that seed says, oh, wow, I can sprout now and grow. And here it was coming right up through. These two plants could not be more completely opposite.
Wow.
They could not be, but one was on its way out because health was coming, and one was on its way in because health was coming. Today, you can't find a broom sedge plant on our entire farm. There's not a single one. We never sprayed. We never applied calcium minerals. We never applied chemical fertilizer, nothing. But we just did good management. We applied compost, and gradually that whole community, that whole thing turned from literally a scab and a rash to
wow,
to beautiful abundance.
It's I'm almost speechless, but I'm not. It's crazy to think that and that we know that I don't know personally, because I'm just getting started in this, that a red clover seed could be dormant for 1,000 years.
Yeah, right.
And it's pretty amazing that nature would likely wait it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wait it out until whoever is guardian of that soil starts to live within the alignment principles of what nature is asking, right? And like you're saying, it's not a wrestle. And this is something I teach my patients too. It's like, it's crazy because it's so parallel to the monstrosity of chronic illness that are that families are experiencing. And I've been doing this long enough now, because I've been, I'm alive 45 years. And then I remember being old enough where my grandfather was like, and I don't speak Cantonese, but he would say, go get my pills. And I would get his pills, and I'd look at them and be like, wow, these are like bright green and they're bright blue, and they're his pills, and it was a pill cutter, and he would give himself his dosage, and I was his guy, I was a pill pusher, I guess. I was his dealer. And then I started to hear my parents talk about their kidneys and their blood pressure, right? And I was like, wait a minute, it was my grandfather, and now it's my parents. And if I really look back, it's about when they're my age, right?
Yeah.
And then I got into practice, and I was like, wait a minute, my peers are having heart issues, And then you go into practice long enough, you specialize in kids, and you're like, holy shit, like these kids are expressing a level of, like you're saying, the food allergies, the chronic illness that these kids are expressing. And then you start to see the generational kind of dynamic of that, because you're essentially passing down bad habits, bad beliefs that lead to bad outcomes. And I'm sitting knee to knee with a parent, a mom, mostly 89% of the time. And I'm expressing to them, like these illnesses and medicine and all the healthcare, most of quote healthcare, that's not healthcare, is complex. It's confusing.
Right.
It's really hard to understand.
Mhm.
But healing is not.
Right.
Healing in nature is radically simple and, dare I say, biological, right? Logical. It's logical. It makes sense that if you do this, if you believe this and then do this, and then your outcome will be different. And that I'm not the person, I'm not the harbinger of that process. I
Mhm.
just know it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think it's such a beautiful depiction for you that a tiny sprig of
Mhm.
red clover amongst a sea
Yeah.
of
Oh,
weeds,
geez.
like could literally just over time,
Yeah.
if you just rinse and repeat, transform.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's transformative. And so when I was told by, our elected officials or by USDA officials that uh that our kind of farming, oh, come on, it doesn't really work. It can't really feed people. It's not credible. It's not, man, let me tell you, I mean, look, we have 1,000 head of cattle. All right. This isn't a
Mhm.
backyard operation. We have 1,000 head of cattle. We do not have a vet bill. We do not have a vet bill. I mean, we might see a vet once in, I don't know what, maybe 3 years to help with a delivery issue that's, a birthing issue that's beyond my ability. But we don't have a vet bill for 1,000 head of cattle. I mean, nobody does
It's
that.
crazy.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. And so this brings you to this point. Well, what makes these sicknesses, and what we've found is every time we've had, we've been in it long, again, we've been in it a long
Mhm.
time, and we've had, about 5 incidents where we had some sicknesses, some animal diseases, problems, and every single time, I can go back to every single time, everyone was our fault. We either crowded them, we didn't give them the right food, we didn't,
Wow.
they were not sanitary, they got uncomfortable, cold, wet, whatever. We bought the wrong calves from a guy that used a bunch of vaccines, and they came in weak. Everyone was our fault, and so I believe that nature's default position. Here's the point: nature's default position is wellness, and if
Mhm.
it's not well, it's not well. It didn't get wet. It didn't get sick because I wasn't using enough pharmaceuticals. It got sick. A cold does not mean you're suffering from NyQuil deficiency. Okay. and and so the sickness is a result of my mismanagement, negligence, whatever, but it's always everyone that we've ever had has been caused by us. And we think that we actually learn a lot more by looking in the mirror and saying, what did I do that allowed the immune system to be overcome, that allowed that wonderful protective shield to be pierced? What did I do to do that? We learn a lot more by asking that than asking, you know, the fairies, something sprinkled disease on our farm, and I apparently just didn't use the right drug or the right concoction. It's a lot better to learn looking in the mirror and saying, what did I do? It's probably my fault.
It's pretty remarkable to have that data point, right? To say, my vet bill is 0.
Right.
And then on contrast,
Mm.
the number one usage of antibiotic globally is actually conventional farming, right?
Yes, that's
Conventional
correct.
farming of animals, right? So,
Animals.
so it's crazy to have that data point that the largest use of one drug
Mhm.
is actually as a result of the opposite style of farming that
Yes.
you and your vet bill is 0, right? Like it's like, if anybody ever argues, it's not, we could go into nutrient density, we can go into soil ecology, you can go into all the different things and just be like, hey, but if it just, how many of you, like I've sat knee to knee with over 1,000 parents at this stage in my career and ask all of them, Like, I think it's 100% to zero. How many of you want more pharma in your life, right? And it's like, no one raises their hand. Like, not one person raises their hand. So it's like, okay, then how would you ever go to the system, right? Why would you go to the system, whether it's your food or whether it's your healthcare?
Mhm.
That is literally like there's no exit to that system once you're in the system.
Right.
I have two, maybe three specific questions to ask you, because some of the people that that I really respect have different takes on this. I'm curious how Polyface navigates things like chemtrails. Like, does it affect, or does
Yeah.
the entire ecosystem that you're already basically create that barrier? Because it seems to be ubiquitous today. They're
Right.
spraying us all the time.
It is. It is. The chemtrails are ubiquitous. They're right. So then I look at, so how does nature detoxify? I mean, because the fact is, we we live in a toxic soup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from electromagnetic to whatever, EMFs, all chemtrails, whatever. So I don't even know that you could go live in a cave and be, and get away from different toxicities. I mean, pesticides are wafting across, I mean, it's just there. All right. So how does nature detoxify? And there's a couple ways. One is the most significant one is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is nature's number
Beautiful.
one detoxicant. And so when we have our animals on pasture and they're ingesting a lot of what we call salad bar, green material, they're ingesting a lot of chlorophyll. Turkeys, chickens, pigs, even the omnivores, obviously herbivores, sheep and cows and goats, they certainly eat that. But I mean, even your dog, your pet dog, will eat grass from time to time. So the animals know. The animals they're not watching TV, so they actually know what they need, and so everything we do here is to stimulate the ingestion, even among things that you don't normally think of as eating grass, like chickens, that they eat the right amount of grass, which means we want to make sure the grass is tender, it's short. I mean, there's a bunch of management. I won't go into all the details of how we do that, but
Totally.
to suffice it to say that time of day, type of grass, length of grass, all these things have an effect on how much they will ingest. And we do
Wow.
everything possible to make sure they have as much grass as possible. That's number one. Number two is organic matter. Organic matter is nature's Alka-Seltzer. It's nature's buffer.
Wow.
The most poignant story I ever read about this, there was a farm in Austria, the Lufkes. It's spelled Luebke, I think. It's pronounced like Lufke. Anyway, back when Chernobyl blew, and you probably don't even remember it, but when Chernobyl blew in Russia, and that radioactive cloud came down across Belarusia, and then it finally, finally rained down in Austria, and it was in the truck farming region of Austria, cabbages and broccoli and things like that. And all the crops got radioactive. So they destroyed them all. And in the entire region, only one farm had no radioactivity in the soil and was able to replant the very next day. And that was the Lufke farm. Why? Because they'd been using compost for 20 years, and their organic matter was up there in the 10% organic matter. Everybody else was down in the 3 and 4% organic matter. They were way up here, and that organic matter simply absorbed and buffered that radioactivity. And so we've taken our organic matter. When we started in 1961, our organic matter averaged 1% here. We're now at 8.2%.
Wow.
And original prairie soils were often up there in the 10 or 11% range. So we're happy where we are, but we still got room to go. And so between the chlorophyll and the organic matter in the soil, we feel like that's as good as we know how to do. I mean, maybe there's something better, but those are two very natural things that can be done, that can scale. Yeah, I mean, are there things like I don't know, maybe apple cider vinegar or something that you could do, aside also. But these are the two macro things, the umbrellas that we can put on our farm, around our animals, to be the first line of defense against toxicity of all types.
That's great. The for those of us that are more novice listeners, define organic matter.
Organic matter is decaying vegetation. So anything that was living that is now dead and decomposing.
That's awesome. The other question that I hear, and I think you answered the question about EMFs, right? You would have the similar answer about
Yes.
EMFs. Yeah. The other question that I get often is about water, and whether it's water quality, or some people are talking about, this concept of infinite water, like if you dig deep enough. I read in your book about aquifers, and I think you mentioned something about really ponds and other aspects. I would love for you to talk a little bit about water as it relates to human health, but also, for your land.
Sure. So water, yeah, I mean, you can't have life without water. Water is kind of the beginning of life. So let me go back 500 years. 500 years ago, North America was 8% water. The surface of North America was 8% water. Today, just for reference, today it's less than 4%.
Wow.
And that's with all the man-made lakes and everything that we've done. Tennessee Valley Authority and Klamath River, all this stuff. With all the dams we've made, we're down to less than 4%. Well, where did we have that? So think about if we had more than double the water surface area in North America. Where did it come from? It was beaver dams. There were 200 million beavers, and this includes down in New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, very dry areas, had very, very large beaver ponds, beaver lakes. Okay, so when you think about that, you just imagine several results of that. Number one is that you have a tremendous thermal mass. Water is thermal mass. It doesn't heat as fast or cool as fast as air. So you have that much surface water. It acts as thermal mass in the environment, and then it also offers evapotranspiration to keep clouds going, and it maintains aquifers and springs and deep flow, and protects the land from erosion. If you have a heavy rain and it's washing off some soil, it doesn't go all the way to the ocean. It stops at the beaver dam, and so you have these kind of over time you kind of get these terraces that build up, behind these beaver dams. All right, and so we're looking at that again. We look at those kind of primordial patterns and realize those are the patterns that were actually more abundant than what we're doing today. Wow. Realize that 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today. We talk about the green revolution and all that. No, the whole thing is a charade. Yes, did it produce? Yes, it did. But more food was produced 500 years ago. Now, it wasn't all eaten by people. There were 2 million wolves that needed 20 pounds of meat a day. That's 40 million pounds of meat a day. There were bison, there were flocks of birds. Audubon sat under a tree in like 1830, and he recorded in his diary, he said, "I couldn't see the sun for 3 days for the flock of passenger pigeons that flew over." Can you imagine a flock of birds flying over, blocking out the sun for 3 days? I mean, that's before Tyson and Pilgrim's Pride and Sanderson Farms and whatever. Okay, so the point is, if we truly want abundance, we actually don't look forward to artificial insemination and to artificial intelligence. When I see AI, I'm saying artificial insemination. All right, I'm a farmer. Okay, artificial intelligence or to fake meat and chemicals. We look back to that abundance that was here before. And so on our farm, we're on a pond building binge. We've built ponds. We're now at, I don't know what, 20 ponds now, and we just keep building them. Every time we get a little bit of money, we build another pond and build another pond, and we just continue to build them, so that now on our farm we have 12 miles of buried water line, that gravity flows from permaculture style high ponds, no pumps, no electricity, just gravity that waters all the farm down here for the livestock, and then we can also use it for irrigation in the dry time. I'll give you one more little statistic. One third of all raindrops run off the land as surface runoff. In other words, this is globally, this is everywhere in the world. So whether you're in a dry area, a wet area, whatever, 1/3 of the raindrops come either too fast or too many at once, and they run off the surface. So let's say that you're in a let's pick a relatively low rainfall area, 21 inches. 21, that's a low rainfall, relatively low rainfall area. All right, that means 7 inches a year are running off the land. 1 acre inch of water is 30,000 gallons. So 7 times 30 is 210,000 gallons of water runs off of every acre in even a 21 inch. We're not talking about a 30 inch, 40 inch, 50 inch. We're talking about a 21 inch rainfall area, which of course is lower than everything east of the Mississippi. And so on your 3 acres, you know what your rainfall is right there?
I think it's around, I mean, it's San Diego County, so I would say it's about that. It's definitely
About 21.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I picked 21,
Yeah.
because I was pretty sure that was about right for you. So that means on your 3 acres, 210,000 times 3 is 330,000 gallons of water is running off of your 3 acres every year. And that's pretty much a global, just a global thing. The point is, you've been there long enough, goodness, why do people go to San Diego? Because it doesn't rain very much. All right. But you also know that there are a few days of the year, maybe 7 to 12 days a year, when water is everywhere. It's running, everything is full. All right. And so the idea, the idea of the pond then is to then trap and capture that water so it can be metered out, later. And if we would do that, we could literally recreate Eden now, because we get the water, but we let it get away from us. Now, the problem in California is that you can't build a pond bigger than a bathtub without a permit, because they call it hoarding. They call it, stealing water and all that. But actually, if it's surface runoff, here's my point. If it's surface runoff, it's already gone.
Yeah.
Okay. You can't hoard or you can't steal surface runoff, because it's already down the river. Okay. And so you get into policy questions and things like this, and this gets really crazy. So what you do is you don't call it a pond, you call it a fire abatement trough, or something. Okay. And you build some ponds, and you build small ponds. You don't build a great big pond and attract a bunch of attention. You build little swimming pool sized ponds, little ponds, a series of them. And the cumulative is you get a lot of water, but the beauty of that is that you reduce your risk of dam breakage, and you get it down small enough that you don't attract all the neighbors' attention.
That's amazing. I imagine we can go on for hours, and I don't want to close, but I have to, because my kid just woke up from her nap. Joel, I would love for you to future pace this world for me, this world that you have been at work with for 50 years. Should people continue to be inspired by your work, continue to kind of move in the direction that you have paved a path for many of us to do, what does that world look like to you?
Well, there's a big difference between what I think will happen and and what could happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a prophet.
Yep.
I don't suggest to know what will happen. I do believe that it will take some crises
Mm-hmm.
to be a wake up call, and perhaps we're in the birthing throes of some crises now. There are a lot of them, as you know. Pediatric illness,
Mm-hmm.
life expectancy is dropping.
Yep.
Water is an issue. Does anybody trust the dollar? Does anybody trust the Fed? I mean, we have an unprecedented now mistrust of the system. So is there something brewing? Maybe so. But what could happen? So we'll put that aside. What could happen is that everybody starts to take their own personal responsibility for, first of all, themselves, and then their own family, their own house. And if you own any land, your own land, you start taking responsibility for you and for what's within your sphere of influence, what's in your circle of influence. That's a la Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And you say, I'm not going to be a victim. Here's the truth. The truth is that what we have today, whether you like it, don't like it, whatever it is, what we have today is the cumulative result of quadrillions and quadrillions of decisions that have been made over time leading up to today. And what we're going to have in 50 years will be the physical manifestation of the decisions we make between now and 50 years. And yes, every one of these decisions is important.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to eat, how you're going to live, what you're going to invest in, who are you going to fund, and who are you going to defund.
Wow.
All of those little decisions have an effect on where we're going to be in 50 years. Don't ever underestimate the cumulative effect of bad decisions or good decisions. And so we need to be on the side of good decisions, making good decisions that are participatory in nature. We've got a lot of ponds here, a lot of frogs. I've never walked by a pond and had frogs that sit on the edge. I've never had a frog look up and say, you know what? I'm just not going to participate today. I'm going to let the flies go by. I'm going to let everything go by. No. Nothing in nature gets a free pass. They're all participating, and we humans, we have to participate too. And our participation and the decisions in that participation will absolutely make the world our grandchildren inherit. And if that's not a sacred enough mission to motivate us to make changes, I don't know what is.
That was my mantra in 2020 when we started this podcast. Was I sat back and I actually shared this with a group of chiropractors recently, because I'm starting to speak back into our profession. Just like, what is the world that our kids are going to inherit from us, right? There's a lot of chiropractors. If you know the history of chiropractic, we've been attacked by Rockefeller medicine since its inception.
Yes.
And we're born and bred that way, whether we like it or not. That is our legacy. And many of them over the last 3 years have been very, very comfortable and very quiet. And I've been trying to inspire in them this kind of mission to just be that beacon for their communities. Because thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I love your focus on the word participation, right? Because in the end, it comes down to that. It's whether or not you are outsourcing or whether or not you're participating. And in the end, when it comes down to it, I'm very grateful that you chose to participate when you got to see that original abundance of your grandfather's garden versus what you guys were seeing in Virginia. And participating year after year has led you to this moment. And for me, I know that I'm blessed from that. I know many of our listeners are, and I know that many of my mentors are. The people that I've looked up to, and some of the farmers that I shared in Jim Gale, everybody always kind of points back to you at some degree. And I couldn't be more thankful. And I am letting you know that I am committing to that participatory nature and inspiring in that. with our future in terms of our family tree, but definitely for other future generations for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. It's been a pleasure.
We appreciate you joining us for this episode of the Future Generations podcast. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as more ways to inspire a brighter future for you and your family, visit us at thefuturegen.com. That's all available exclusively on thefuturegen.com.